Trump is meeting with South Korea's newly elected president, Lee Jae-myung, at the White House. There's a lot on the table, from trade to dealing with North Korea and China.
We have some additional trade because I hear they want to renegotiate the deal, but that's okay. I don't mind that. That doesn't mean they're going to get anything, but I don't mind. But we're going to have some very serious discussions about different things, including trade, where we do a lot of trade with South Korea, as you know. We are thinking about contracting some ships.
Last month, South Korea agreed to a 15% U.S. tariff while allowing U.S. products to enter their country with no tariff. South Korea has proposed a $150 billion investment plan called Make American Shipbuilding Great Again. The goal is to help rebuild the U.S. shipbuilding industry using Korea's expertise in the field. Trump said he wants the U.S. to go back into the shipbuilding business again. The president also highlighted that he plans to meet with North Korean regime leader Kim Jong-un and usher in a new era of peace on the Korean peninsula.
I will do that, and we'll have talks. He'd like to meet with me, but we look forward to meeting with him, and we'll make relations better. You'll help that. You had a lot of leaders. I've gone through a lot of leaders in South Korea. You know, it's been quick. You'll be there for a long time. But we, in the various leaders that I've dealt with, they were not approaching it properly, in my opinion, having to do with North Korea. But I think your approach is a much better one.
Trump didn't provide additional details about a potential meeting with Kim, but did say he would visit China to meet with Chinese regime leader Xi Jinping, probably this year or shortly thereafter. Trump said stopping the proliferation of nuclear weapons will be a key agenda item, and said he believes both Russia and China will be willing to cooperate on the effort. And joining us now to discuss President Trump's meeting with South Korea's newly elected president is retired Lieutenant Colonel Darren Gobb, former Black Hawk helicopter pilot and battalion commander in the U.S. Army. He's also a geopolitical strategist. Good afternoon to you, Colonel. So during the meeting, President Trump said the U.S. will be buying ships from South Korea. What do you think here? How could this benefit the U.S. and its strategic goals in the region?
Well, Don, yeah, the first thing I would say is that this is going to continue to drive South Korea and the United States closer together, especially after South Korea went through such a turbulent change of leadership in their country. And that led to a severe risk of South Korea getting closer and closer to China. But if they can increase their economic ties to the United States, then I think those ties will be stronger than potentially ideological or otherwise. So this could be a positive thing, and the trip could lead to many other positive things. But so that will be the ultimate question, though, is where do they feel their allegiances now lie, closer to the west or closer to the east?
Okay, I was going to talk about that later in the interview, but since you brought it up here, what do you make of the fact that the president sent a delegation to Beijing ahead of his meeting with Trump?
Yeah, I guess that would be considered normal Trump type activity, is to go make sure they talk to all the parties involved the best they can. And whether that trip was specifically timed to the fact that the South Korean leader was coming to the United States, only they truly know that. But this is typical Trump in the end. I'm going to talk to anybody, try to work a deal with anybody that I can in order to help all sides. But I think he's realistic enough to know that the Chinese Communist Party is not an ally and will not be an ally of the United States anytime soon. But if we can at least keep our influence in the region through nations like Japan, like South Korea, potentially even Vietnam and others, then we're at least making sure that China doesn't continue to grow at a pace that we can't keep up with regarding with our own allies.
Can you describe for us the balancing act that South Korea is potentially navigating between Washington and Beijing? What factors is it weighing? Where does the country stand right now? Where does the South Korean president stand?
Well, it seems like the South Korean president would most likely be better aligned with Beijing than Washington, D.C. when it comes to ideology. But the American dollar and free trade, or mostly free trade tends to carry a lot of weight, and that may change his mind when it comes to his nation being able to enjoy the economic benefits of of a continued alliance with us, as well as the general benefits of adopting capitalism in full. I've lived in Korea. I've seen what their nation is like, and they are a thriving capitalist society. And I don't think they want to sacrifice that anytime soon in order to align even a little bit with an ideology that does not lead to economic freedom for anybody, really, other than a few so-called elites.
Okay, some specifics here about the meeting. Trump floated the idea of the U.S. owning some land in South Korea on which a massive military base would be built. What do you think about that? How beneficial could this be for the U.S. and its allies?
Yeah, one of the things about South Korea and the U.S. military presence there is like other nations where we've been, there was a time when you had military forces spread throughout multiple smaller bases, and I've lived on some of them. That's always not the best way to do business. It started out that way largely because of what the post-Korean War scenario looked like. Things have changed some. So if you can consolidate and gain some efficiency with the American military presence in South Korea, not only because of just general efficiencies from being all in one location, the other piece would be that we can work as a joint force in South Korea better between the American Army, Air Force, Navy, and others. I think that's a positive thing. We just have to keep our eye on the fact that North Korea is trying to become a nuclear threat, and that's the danger of putting everything in one place too. Is it's a lot easier to target, but I think the benefits in this case outweigh anything that you would take away from it.
Okay, so talking about North Korea, what do you think the South Korean president's relationship is with North Korea? Because Trump complimented President Lee, saying that his approach to North Korea is much better than his predecessors. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, there's always a risk that the relationships between North and South Korea can become very negative based on whether and which side is aggressively maneuvering to do something specific. Having lived there, having worked in the intelligence community over there, one of the greatest risks has always been actually South Korea going north, not so much North Korea going south. So I guess the question then becomes, is that approach then something where the South Korean president recognizes that you can't do major moves with North Korea. You have to do smaller moves and hope that eventually you'll be able to gradually influence to a greater degree, rather than be aggressive and take a threatening posture towards them, which just makes them return that same aggressiveness to them. Hopefully that holds true. We'll see if it does or not, but North Korea will always be a bit of a wild card.
Okay, so in this meeting, how much leverage do you think the U.S. has in terms of achieving its desired goals with South Korea? Because Trump has said as well he wants Seoul to increase defense spending, for example.
Mm-hmm. Primary leverage with South Korea will remain the economic ties. And if we can continue to build that, I think you'll see our two nations remain allies into the future for a very long time. And that's honestly needs to happen. The greatest leverage we would have to influence anything that happens in North Korea, besides the direct potential talks coming up between Trump and North Korea, would be through China. Because if it wasn't for China, North Korea largely would probably not be in existence still today the way it is. They've kept them alive as a nation for a very long time, and that's just a irrefutable fact for those of us who've lived over there. So two different ways of approaching things, but ultimately, if you're talking to both of them and you don't factor in China, then you're not going to get the whole picture.
Okay, just finally, Colonel, generally speaking, how important is South Korea as an ally to the U.S. In the region, of course, in the face of challenges from North Korea and China?
They're an important ally, and they always have been, primarily just due to the economic ties, the success of capitalism, the success of freedom on the Korean Peninsula that they hadn't had before. Put them together with Japan and other nations in the Pacific region, and what you're doing is creating a series of allies with the United States that can help make sure China knows that we have those allies in the region and we're not going away. And they're not going to become some sort of global hegemon that they're trying to be. That's important. So the more of those allies we can make, the better. I think what's open for debate is American force structure. The total number of people on the Korean Peninsula may not be as big a number as it need, or it might need to be smaller than what it was when I was there, even 27 years ago. Different threat, different circumstances, but ultimately, though, we need to keep them as an ally.
Okay, Colonel, it's always great to hear your insight. Thank you so much for coming today.
Thanks, Tom.
Coming up after the break, a demographics